Namaste, it's Sahara Rose, and welcome back to the Highest Self podcast, a place where we discuss what makes you your soul's highest evolvement. If it's your first time listening, welcome. I am so grateful to have you here. This is a place that we get freaky in the spiritual world. We discuss it all. We keep it real, raw, relatable, and sometimes I like to talk like a radio host. If you're here all the time, you might like this voice for change. So I'm really excited for this episode because you know I love me some archetypes. I love that shit. It's so fun. I mean, archetypes have been the most major catalyst for me because they've allowed me to learn about myself in a way that it's like, oh shit, I see those patterns, and it's easy to see it when it's like called something else and not you, you know, and you're able to have a little bit of separation from it and then also able to see things that you may not have looked in yourself. So for me, my archetype work really started with Ayurveda, the doshas. These three doshas, the Ayurvedic mind-body types, are archetypes. They are archetypes that teach us about our mind, our personality, our body, our physiology, digestion, all of the things. I mean, if you're interested in learning more about that, head over to my website, iamsahararose.com. You'll see Discover Your Dosha. There's a quiz right there. I email you all this amazing content on Ayurveda. I've written 2 books on it, Idiot's Guide to Ayurveda and Eat, Feel Fresh. So I'm not going to get too deep into Ayurveda, but that was really my first archetypal system. From there, I began learning about the Michael teachings, which is a channeled material of work by a group of 1,008 souls called Michael. Kind of out there, but I'm into that stuff. And they talk about these different soul archetypes. You know, they have different names for them: the king, the server, the artisan, etc. And for me, it really helped me see my own, which was the priest or priestess, and how. And this was before I was doing any of this work, when I completely doubted myself. And I knew I loved to write, but I never thought I'd have a career as a writer. Like, I thought blogging is just something I would do on the side. But it was able to show me that as the priestess archetype, I have this message in me that I'm not actually fueled by money. I'm fueled by impact. And when I'm speaking, I come alive, and I have this glisten in my eyes because it's my soul coming alive. And then also the shadow sides of that I might not have noticed, like, you know, meeting someone and trying to save their life and telling them all these things to do and giving them this compelling talk on why they need to change their ways. And they're just like not open to it, not receptive to it, don't care, which can actually end up, you know, not backstabbing, but going back on progress for you and progress for themselves. So I've learned not to screw with other people's karma. And what that really means is some people need to learn the journey for themselves. Certain lessons they are actually supposed to learn from themselves, and other people are meant to act as guides, but only when you are ready. So it's like someone giving you advice when you're not asking for it. Yeah, I used to do that all the time. And I thought that I was helping people. So learning about the archetypes allowed me to see that I do really want to help people, etc., but I'm not also going to be like screaming on the streets about it. Like, I'll let people come to me. And then later, a huge archetypal system that I became interested in was human design. And I'm a projector, which is the exact same thing of waiting for the invitation. And the projector has this huge, clear vision. And I can like see all the things. And like for other people, I like can tell everything. I'm like, your Dharma is this is what you're supposed to do with your brand. These are what your offers should be. Like, that is just like my jam. It's so clear and it's so easy for me to see for other people, not always for myself. But to wait for that invitation, wait until someone asks for it. So archetypes, which maybe I'll do a whole other podcast on, just like working with so many different archetypes. There are, you know, Enneagram archetypes. There are the goddesses. The goddesses are an archetypal system. So looking at Saraswati to represent our creativity, or Durga to represent our courage, our fierceness, our dharma. Looking at Lakshmi to represent our abundance, our fertility, our prosperity. Looking at the Greek goddesses, Athena, our warrior strength. Aphrodite, love and beauty. Look at goddess Isis in Egypt. Looking at Aina in the Celtic culture. There's goddesses all around the world, and this is what I teach about in Rose Gold Goddesses, my Sacred Sisterhood collective, all about becoming your highest self, which you can learn more about at rosegoldgoddesses.com. So archetypes are my jam, needless to say, and I believe everyone should know about archetypes because they really allow us to paint the picture and put together pieces of the puzzle that we may not have otherwise. So in this conversation with my friend Gina Devee, we talk all about the queen archetype and then different archetypes that are like the not queen shadow side. So what is the princess like? What is, the defeatist like? What is, the martyr like? And that's actually my shadow archetype. So we talk about all of these different archetypes and you're going to notice yourself. Am I fully in my queen? Am I in my get shit done, handle things like a boss, like queendom, royalty, I get what I want? Or am I in my saboteur? Am I in my naive princess, etc.? So I really love this conversation because it opens up the doors of so many new archetypes that I haven't worked with and maybe you haven't worked with yet, and just gives you a better picture of seeing yourself and seeing others. So without further ado, let's welcome Gina Devee to the Highest Self podcast. Are you that person that all your friends and family members come to when they need wellness advice? Are you constantly looking up new ways to heal and balance your mind, body, and spirit, including listening to this podcast? Well, have you ever considered having a career becoming a holistic health coach where you get to decide your own hours, work with people, tackling the subjects that you are the most passionate about, and having financial freedom along the way? Well, I'm so excited to be teaming up with my very own alma mater, Institute for Integrative Nutrition, to offer their biggest discount yet. You'll receive $2,250 off tuition, an extra bonus that they're offering just with my Highest Self podcast listeners on how to launch your dream book. This course is going to get you super clear on what your book is about and how to bring it out into the world. I've created a webinar for you on how to have a thriving business as a health coach. So using social media, creating passive income, how to have a wait list of clients and become the best known coach in your niche with raving testimonials. Tickets to a live upcoming IIN conference where I will be meeting you over there. Super excited to connect. And a bundle of all digital wellness guides like Ayurveda, self-love, whole food eating, etc. So all you have to do is head over to my show notes. You'll see the link over there. It's a little bit.ly link. It'll take you right there. You'll be able to receive a sample class, check out the curriculum, get all your questions answered. And I'm so excited to have you on this mission, raising the vibration of the planet together as a health coach. Again, head over to my show notes. You'll see the link right there, and I'll see you inside. Okay, real talk, the product I'm about to tell you about is literally the best thing I've ever put into my mouth, and that is saying a lot. And this is Organifi's Gold. So essentially, it is the hot chocolate of your dreams with none of the sugar and all of the turmeric and reishi, with a touch of ginger as well. It is delicious on its own, just with water. When I was on my Panchakarma and I couldn't have any sugar or chocolate, anything like that, I brought my Organifi Gold with me. Panchakarma approved, and all I needed was hot water, and it was the perfect, just sweet, soothing, desserty taste that I so deeply crave after meals. And it makes me feel so calm, so restorative. It is my optimal nighttime tonic. And literally, I've gotten all my friends on it, and I'm pinching myself that they are my podcast sponsors, because even if they weren't, I would still be telling everyone about it. So head over to Organifi.com and use coupon code Sahara for 20% off. That is Organifi, Organifi.com. Use coupon code Sahara for 20% off your gold. Welcome, Gina, to the Highest Self podcast. It's so great to have you here.
Sahara, it is such a delight to be here.
And the first question I'd love to ask you is, what makes you your highest self?
Ooh, juicy right from the get-go. What makes me my highest self is when I embrace and embody the totality of me in the present moment. And I think that so oftentimes in my life, I've seen me splinter myself and show up one way for one person and a different way for a different organization. And the older I get and the more developed I get, I find that I bring the totality of me, and that feels the highest self.
I love that. And I think that's something that a lot of people aspire to do, to fully be them, to be paid to be them, which we'll definitely talk about, and to not feel like, I think in every situation, different archetypes of ourselves come out, which we'll dive deep into in this episode. But to know that you are the consistency that's between all of those archetypes. You're the same you with your husband as you are with your client, as your mom, and to allow more of that to show up, to not feel like you have to like totally fit into one box.
It's to not fit in one box, and then in owning the totality of you. And I'm sure we'll discuss this further. There's the light shadow archetypes, and then there's the dark shadow archetypes, and really getting comfortable with all of it. Like our brilliance and our fabulousness, and having like the compassion for your own self as a human being and other human beings from the shadow side also.
I love that. So I love me a good archetype, and you love you a good archetype. So I'm really excited to dive in. And your work has really been about embodying the queen within, which I love and is so similar to the goddess, but I feel like it's also different. So can you share what it means to embody your inner queen?
Yes. So the queen archetype, the reason why I love the queen is she is the masterful blend of the masculine and the feminine. And for the way that I like to operate in the world, I've really honed not just defaulting to my masculine and really thriving in my femininity, but not making any part of me wrong, including the masculine. Because I think sometimes like we've revered the masculine too much, and then we'll do this pendulum swing and we're like, I'm all feminine. And I'm like, like masculine is bad. Masculine's not bad. It's just learning when to use which energy. And when you allow yourself that totality, then you're just in a place of thriving. So part of what I love about the queen is she's the masterful blend of both. As we'll dive into, I'm sure, I am obsessed with all things personal development, spiritual connection, contribution, and lifestyle, materialistic pleasures in life, all of that. And so I'm very, very grateful that the universe did not give me like the monk archetype, which with all due respect, because I have a very high reverence for monks, I just like my castle and my clothes and that whole world too. So I love the queen archetype for all of the flair and the drama. And then it's also about being a benevolent queen. As women, we are feminine leaders, and we're leading our communities and our families and this world. And so it's the leadership element that embodies the feminine values that I so love about the queen also.
I love that so much. And that's so much of the conversation today that I think we're having of, can we be spiritual and still want money and still want luxuries in our lives? And I think so many of us grew up like, oh, a spiritual person is someone that has no desires and no wants and no thing outside of them. And we're like, oh, screw that, then I'm not going to be spiritual. And now it's really that integration of the two. And to me, like that queen is a boss. Totally. She makes decisions. She's in her throne. She's choosing things. And it's like she has that divine feminine power like a goddess. But when I think of goddess, I think a little bit more mystical, a little bit more spiritual, a little bit probably more in her feminine than the queen. I see the queen has that strong masculine, like decision making. The goddess is, there's so many different goddesses. Like there's Durga, who's like totally different, and they're all queens in their own right. But it's like, how do you see goddess and queen?
Very similar to what you were describing. The goddess to me in general is, though she is ultra fierce, as we know, she is really predominantly feminine is what I experience the goddesses to be. And with the queen, you're right. And she's very much rooted in this earth, though she does very much have a spiritual connection and seeks source and, is divinely guided. There's this very grounded way of being in the world that the queen is, and who she is as an initiator and a leader and is visible. So there's a lot of the masculine elements there, but then she is feminine and insightful and intuitive and spiritual. So it is both.
I love that so much. And I remember growing up, you think you're a princess until you get married or you're a mother or something has to happen for you to become a queen. So I was always like, oh, I'm a princess. I'm not a queen. But, when I was reading your archetypes, I'm like, I'm definitely the queen. I'm not the princess. So can you share a little bit how you, in your words, define princess?
Yes. So the princess is, well, first of all, in her most empowered self, the princess is young and she is naive. And there's beautiful innocence in naivete and youthfulness and all of like the newness of life that we get to experience when we don't have life experience. So the princess, we're all meant to be princess when we are younger. And then just not just some people, but some areas within most of us, typically, we get stunted somewhere along the line. And so even though we were meant to evolve and grow and mature and expand in our consciousness, in our psychology, in our emotional maturity, there's places where it's gotten stunted. And so that's a lot what I write about, is where we can really see the difference for us adult women, where we are growing and thriving in our queen mentality and where we are getting stuck and behaving like a princess or behaving like a teenager or a little girl.
Totally. And, I see a lot of people in their princess in business. I'm sure you see this too, but like,
totally.
Oh, I can't do all the business things. I'm not a finance person. I'm not a tech person. We put up all of these excuses of why running a business is so hard that we don't try and realize that we're so much more capable than we give ourselves credit for.
Yes. That, that really comes from conditioning in a way. There's like the entitled side of princess, like, I shouldn't have to do that. And then there's also the martyred side of princess of like, oh, like I have to, I have to do everything and I have to think for everyone and it's all, falling on me. But then there's the avoidant princess, like, oh, I'm not good with technology. Oh, I'm not good with numbers. I'm not good with Excel spreadsheets. And I can speak well to these because I've pretty much been all of them. And, part of my own growth and healing and strengthening was really reclaiming all these aspects of myself. When I grew up, my brother's really smart and so is my mom. Not that me and my dad aren't, but they're like, just, I don't know. And there sort of became this joke of like they were so good with math. And so it sort of was like, well, Gina's not good with numbers. And it was like this story that I then told myself, like, oh, I'm not good with numbers. So if you're not good with numbers, you can't be good at business, is what I told myself. And I carried that into my 20s. And it just like automatically took me out of being an empowered boss, until I changed the story. And actually, I'm really good with numbers. I'm really good with business. And I told myself the story in so many areas. It was so being a princess, like, oh, I'm not good with technology, copywriting, branding, sales. It was just all the stuff that I didn't have experience. I didn't think I was good at it. So therefore, I didn't like it. And then I just told myself I wasn't good at it, which was an excuse. So queens follow a no excuses policy, and either you become good at it or you hire someone who is. And if you don't have the money to hire someone who is, then you become good at it until you can hire someone who is.
I so relate to that. I also was like, I'm not a math and science person, and I definitely never thought I'd run a business. And I was also told by my mom this kind of story of, you either have a happy marriage or you're a career woman, but you can't have both, because everyone that I see around me who has a career woman, their husbands leave them and cheat on them and they gain weight. And, and it was, her own conditioning that she brought up, was raised with, that, woman just didn't work. And the stories that they would tell themselves to make themselves feel better about it was, well, if I became a career woman, then I'm not worthy of love. So I always thought, okay, you either choose money or love, but you can't have both. So I'll choose love. So because of that, I thought, oh, I don't want to get, too financially successful or any financially successful, because then I won't find a partner that wants to marry me.
It's such a big story women have been told and tell themselves.
So another thing that you write about the princess, which I think a lot of people can relate to, is they speak with disclaimers. So the people who are always apologizing about what they're going to say, or like, is it okay if I ask you a question? Like, how do we know if we're speaking with disclaimers, and how can we catch ourselves and reframe our vocabulary?
Oh, it is. It's like once you start to have the consciousness where you can hear it, like you just can't listen to a smart, empowered, grown woman like start sentences with these disclaimers. And, it can be anything from like, like, I hope you don't mind, or I don't want to mean to bother you, or, I'm sorry to ask, or I know this sounds silly. It's probably a stupid question, but I'll tell you, one of the ones that bugs me the most is at a restaurant. Can I have the club sandwich? Of course you can have the club sandwich. It's on the menu. It's like, be a queen. I would like the club sandwich, please. It's this whole just asking for permission energy that's in all these disclaimers takes anyone who starts their sentence with that out of the game.
That is such a good example. Well, I was always like, my mom always said, may I have, but I would want to say, can I have? And she'd always be like, no, say, may I have, which definitely brings in a more queenliness. What are other examples because I think most of us think it's polite to be like, excuse me, sorry to ask, or do you mind if I ask you a question? Like, what else do you see?
Well, I'll tell you the big thing that I see. I don't see men behaving that way. Like, I can't even imagine my husband saying, would it be okay if I ask a question? Or can I have the steak? Like, I mean, like, I
no,
can't
you
even
cannot.
Right. And like men, like in their empowered masculine, there's just a real power of self-assuredness where they give themselves the right to speak up, say what they desire, and I think that we women in practicing our queenhood could really take a page out of that playbook and speak directly. And so that's part of like the masculine of the queen that I love, we're stuck on this club sandwich. I don't like club sandwiches, but anyways, I would like the club sandwich, please. So you can be gracious, you can be polite, you can be considerate. And as a queen, you actually must be all three of those. And you can be direct and clear.
So true. I love that so much. And what do you think about, a lot of people in their businesses, I see them on the other side living in fantasy. You have a mastermind, I have a mastermind. I see a lot of people going from one end of the spectrum of like, nothing's possible for me, and then they're like, I'm going to this year do all of these things that are not possible for any human to do in 1 year. And then they set the pedestal so high that they end up, essentially being so overwhelmed and doing nothing.
Yes. So princesses do live in fantasy. And it's part of how they run and operate. It's kind of like dogs do bark. And so if you're going to be in a princess mentality, that fantasy is part of it. When we were little girls, like we had like imaginary friends and we played in the fantasy that whatever, one day the prince would come or whatever the fantasy was. And queens they have a great relationship with time, and princesses do not, because princesses are like either the martyr will be like, it'll never happen for me, and the princess is like, I'm gonna make $10 million tonight, and a queen has the wisdom of all the different seasons of a woman's life. And what I know about my own story, and, I started out as a struggling psychotherapist. I was living off of $24,000 a year. And I went to a seminar once and I heard that you can turn your yearly income into your monthly income. And I was like, what? And I was like calculating what that would be. Like at that time, I didn't know anybody who made $250,000. And so when I heard that, I was like, if that's humanly possible, I'll take a yes, please. And I did. And in my first year of business, I went from 24 to 250. And then I went to 500 and I crossed seven figures in 3.5 years. And what I learned in that process was I'm so happy I did not make more money faster because I was so loving who I was becoming in the process. And sometimes there were steps and other times there were quantum leaps, but none of it was fantasy. The mystical realm provided miracles, but it wasn't fantasy in the fake space, in the fake way. And so that's what I love about a queen is she can really she can push herself if that's what she desires, and sometimes the universe is bringing on the really intense lessons, great and fine, but there's a real connection and there's not like a spiritual bypass in that process.
That is so well said. And I experienced the same thing going from, in 2016 under the poverty level and then making, what I thought was like a professional salary. Oh my God, I made it. And then like doubling and doubling until I crossed 7 figures this past year as well. And, that was never a thing that I even thought was possible for me. I always thought I'd have to marry someone that had that. And essentially I wanted to marry someone who was successful and had their own business and, liked to do like fun wellnessy things on the weekend and was a DJ. And guess what, bitches? I became that thing.
Yes,
so it is possible for all of us. So that's that elevation.
Yes, you do. I think so many of us that have had this awakening, we realize we were trying to marry who we desired to become.
Yes. And I think that's that shifting from the princess to the queen. The princess is like, I need someone else to be that. I know I want to be around these things. So I need to find someone else who's around them instead of, realizing that you have the responsibility and the power to make that your own reality. And then it's not contingent upon anyone else because no one in your life is a guarantee except for yourself.
Exactly. And really getting what the deepest desire actually is. I mean, same as you, Sahara, when I would go shopping with my mom as a little girl, just happened to naturally pick out the most expensive things apparently. And she would always say, Gina, you better make sure you marry a wealthy man. And it just wasn't in the consciousness at the time. She never said, Gina, you better make sure you learn how to make a lot of money yourself. And so really getting that it is the desires that are within us, that is what is real and that is what's meant to be manifested. And so my deepest desire wasn't ever actually to marry a wealthy man. But I told myself that for so long, I believed it. My deepest desire was actually to be the rock star. I wanted to marry the rock star. And yet I didn't realize I wanted to be the rock star of my own life. That was the deepest desire. So it's really special when you realize what choices you have, what power you have, and what you've actually been destined for all along.
So ladies, look at what kind of man or woman that you thought that you would end up with and what qualities do they have, because those are all qualities that you have inside of you.
Yes.
Yeah. So I want to talk about some more archetypes. Let's talk about the saboteur. So who is the saboteur? How do we know if we are acting like the saboteur in our own lives?
Oh, it's such a sneaky one. Being a transformational coach for almost 20 years now, I obviously I've worked with, thousands of women around the world who are into self-sabotage. And that's just like their programming and it's their thing. And we it's always easy to see someone else's stuff, right? Well, look at her upper limiting and look at her self-sabotaging that relationship again, or look at her self-sabotaging her career, etc. And I knew that I had many issues, but according to moi, self-sabotage just wasn't one of them. And until I started writing this book and really diving in to see how sneaky it is and all of the unconscious programming that happens in most of us to hold ourselves back from shining in our full glory and accessing our full power. So that is something that, I really saw how personal the saboteur was to me, and just really started to take, radical responsibility in who do I need to become and what do I need to do to say yes to the forward movement. And I was started constantly asking myself, Gina, how good are you willing to let life get? How good are you willing to let life get? And then I would see when like my stomach would tighten, or I'd go to recoil, or when I'd come up to my own edge or learning curve, or have to get out of my comfort zone. And the tendency and the sophisticated excuses and the justification about why I couldn't ... move forward in the direction of my dreams became something I really took a lot of personal responsibility around to get out of, because that saboteur is a sneaky one.
I'd love to know, because you're someone who's so queenly. What was it like for you when that saboteur showed up for your book writing process?
Okay. So people think that I'm really disciplined, and it's always such a crack up to me because my husband would know and would laugh, and so would my team even. Like, I don't want to say I'm the least disciplined person, but I'm not, that's not my natural nature. I'll just say it that way. I'm not a workaholic. I'm actually not that disciplined. What I am is obsessed with results. It's part of my nature, and like that, it's part of my joy in my passion place. So I have trained my mind to get really good at decision making and to be trustworthy to myself when I make a decision. So then when I make a decision, I don't go back on it. I'm not a quitter. I don't back out. I've learned that. So when I sat down to write this book, it was like, when you get to a place when you've been doing something for 20 years, you can get kind of comfortable with it because you think you know what you're doing, and you think you know how it works, and it's familiar. And so writing a book, this was my first time, and it was like I was a freshman all over again. I was like, how does this work? And when's it going to end? Whoa, this is harder than I thought it was going to be. And so there were all these places to tell myself where, maybe I won't make the deadline, or it's okay if the book isn't that good. I'll do better on my second book. And I started letting myself off the hook mentally when I got scared. And then I just realized this is a place of the saboteur showing up. And the fastest remedy, I'm talking instant remedy to the saboteur, is to reconnect with your spiritual connection. Because the only way I could be thinking those thoughts is if I was completely reliant on myself. Like, are the words that I'm coming up with going to resonate with the people? And is this interesting? Or is this joke funny? Or, all of that was like me. That was ego. And it was like instantly, Gina, shift back. And then it was like, dear source, how would you have me be used right now? And as soon as you connect with your spirituality and with source, there's no saboteur around. It's like lighting a match in a dark room. Like, once there's light, the darkness has to go away. And so that's what I found, is that the saboteur really showed up when I wasn't consciously in tune with my spiritual connection.
That is so beautiful. And I love that affirmation of just let me be of service to spirit. Let me get out of my own way. And, whatever way you say it, and it's just to realize that this work that you're putting out there, it's not for you. It's not even from you. It's rather through you. And then when you take it out of that, it's like, I think a lot of us, we get stuck in our perfectionism, and that's actually the next archetype, Little Miss Perfect. But I think Little Miss Perfect is creating the saboteur, because if it's not perfect, then I'm just not going to do it. Whereas sometimes just the way that the divine initially showed it to you was perfect. Sometimes I will write something and then I'll go back and I'll edit and I'll get in my head. And then I'll be like, this is actually worse than how I started it as. But our minds, our society tells us like, oh, your first draft is never good enough. But when you're in a channeled state, that first draft is the gift from source.
I heard that when Norah Jones played one of her first songs on her first album, there were no edits. It was just that it just came through. And so, I think everyone's just got to be on her own process. What I got really comfortable with was just writing in flow. And for me, I like dropped into the joy of the editing process. Like I actually became a lover of put the first draft out on the page, and then I would love to go and like select different words and then like punch up a joke. And so it was almost like cooking for me, like adding like the layers of flavor. First you saute the aromatics, and then you add the stock, and then you add the salt, and it's like melding of the flavors. So that's where I was able to get to with the writing process. But there were a few demons and dragons and little Miss Perfects and saboteurs along the way.
Totally. Yeah. And it's just you're only going to figure out your process when you give it a try. Like I hate editing. I will once I write it, I just hand it to the editor. I'm like, yeah, whatever you think. And I kind of just skim over it. Editing feels so draining for me. I don't like to go over and think about it. So essentially everything I write is just a first draft that like I'll fix some like typos, and maybe like if something is not really easily understood, I'll like clarify a little bit more, but I'm definitely like not swapping out words or adding in jokes later. And that's just, for me, that would feel more draining than I try to just get it on the first try. And maybe that's I don't know, that's just how I do things. I feel like I just like go in and I'm like intense, and then I'm like, okay, I'm done. I don't want to look at it anymore.
Mm-hmm. Every queen gets to pick her style.
Yes. Yes. So let's talk about Little Miss Perfect. What is she like?
Oh, codependent, that's for sure. And I'm only laughing because this was probably one of my one of my biggest ones that I really had to slay. So, Little Miss Perfect is just so in need of other people's approval, and she's got to get it right, but right according to other people, not her own sense of self, not her own desires, not her own way of being in the world. And it's a very neurotic place to live. But even more than that, what I thought was being so nice and considerate and compassionate for other people, because I was like, oh, well, what does someone else want? Or what's going to make them happy? Or what are they going to like? Or how can I show up so they won't get angry? Or whatever the story was. And it wasn't until I did the deeper dive in writing this book that I realized what a manipulative way to exist. And what I mean by that is because it was never actually considering the other person and what they actually wanted. Like the whole spirit behind this way of thinking is manipulation. And how can I get someone to like me? How can I get someone to approve of me? So it was like this like little chess game in my mind unconsciously at the time, because I wasn't just genuinely thinking of the other person. And that's just what codependency is. It's like one big self-obsession. It's like, how can I be safe in the world? How can I be okay? And by needing other people's approval to feel at peace within yourself or to feel okay in the world is a very, it's a very terrorizing way to live. And so that's one of the reasons why I bring out this archetype in the book, because I know so many women are suffering with Little Miss Perfect running the show.
Yes, I think codependency is such a huge issue. And, most of us, we think that codependency is actually obsession of the other person, but I like how you actually reframed it. And it's actually like ourselves, because it's our own need for validation of survival, security, et cetera. Can you speak a little bit more into what are some codependent patterns that people can look into?
Yes. So codependency, like the classic form of it is, when someone is dependent on someone else. And so usually what this means is the person who is dependent, so like the Little Miss Perfect, doesn't have a sense of self, isn't thinking for herself, and like doesn't even feel okay if someone else doesn't feel okay. So you have that girlfriend that like if her boyfriend's in a bad mood, then she's like got to go home and like make sure that she's like tidying up the apartment or cooking his favorite food or whatever. Like she like can't relax because he's whatever, had a bad day at work or is upset with himself for whatever reason. Or, oftentimes you'll see it with women, even into their adult life, like married women with children and their own mother, right? Like they're terrified of their own mother because their mother wouldn't approve of this or, because they didn't want to go to the whatever family function and their mother would be furious. And then they can't be okay within themselves if someone else is not happy. These are just a couple examples of how that looks and how it can show up. I write some very revealing and vulnerable stories when I needed approval from my own clients. So I was like setting boundaries within my own business and, just thinking, hey, it's my business. I'm allowed to be clear on what my boundaries are and set those boundaries. And then when other people didn't like them, it was terrorizing for me. And I wanted to like buckle and crumble. But fortunately, Spirit was using those incidences as an opportunity to show me, A, that I was codependent because I didn't see that I was. B, that like how much I needed other people's approval to really feel okay in the world. And then C, how I will always lose anytime I make anyone source other than source. So basically I was making these people God and I was like almost like worshiping them like God and like, trying to like please them like God. And nobody is God, spirit, source, universe, higher power other than source.
So well said. And really that too, like someone might think, oh, codependency means you're obsessed with your mom or you're obsessed with your husband, but it's from yourself. It's coming from what would happen to me if they leave me, if they aren't happy with me anymore. So really
say bad things about me.
Exactly. And I think, the parent one is a huge one. That's definitely one that I've had to do major, transformation around of just not living for someone else's expectations. But a lot of us, we pretend we don't mind. Oh, it's not that big of a deal. Oh yeah, my mom's nosy, but it's fine. That's just what moms are like. And we don't admit how much it's actually bothering us and interrupting us. And we suck it in, and, it's going to seep out somewhere in your life. And maybe it's going to seep out to that wrong person or even worse, to yourself. This episode is brought to you by Four Sigmatic. Four Sigmatic is an incredible mushroom elixir company. I proudly drink their elixirs every single day. My favorite is their chai mix. It is insanely delicious. I quit chocolate cold turkey, and what helped me was drinking this chai mix every day. And best of all, they use stevia to sweeten it, and there's no sugars like the chai lattes you'll find at Starbucks or wherever else. And the mushrooms are really good for balancing your hormones, helping heal adrenal fatigue, healing your body on an adaptogenic level. So adaptogens really kind of relate to what your body needs. So if you are high stress, it will bring you down. If you need more energy, it will bring you up. And that's what's so amazing about adaptogens. They adapt to your body, and mushrooms, medicinal mushrooms, have a lot of adaptogenic properties. So you can head over to their website, foursigmatic.com, foursigmatic.com/Sahara. I have a little shop up there with my favorite Four Sigmatic products. So you can try it out, and you can also get 15% off any Four Sigmatic product using the code Sahara.
I just really want to say that anybody suffering from codependency, or maybe they don't even realize it, like you probably realize that you're afraid of what other people are going to think of you, or that you're afraid of what someone else might say about you. And I want you to know that there is freedom from that. Like, because that was like just my whole paradigm, my whole self-belief, I lived in it my whole life. I didn't know that there was anything on the other side of it. And, though it took me a really rough, like ripping away of that ego and archetype and all of it, it freed me in the biggest way. And I'm so much more, free and confident and sassy and individualistic because I'm no longer suffering from that. So I just want you to know that there's so many resources in my book, of course, but so many other resources too, like from coaching to books to podcasts, etc. Like, do what it takes to get to the real you, because that's where the real dance is.
I love that. So let's talk about the defeatist. How does the defeatist show up in our lives?
The defeatist is different for different women. A lot of it can show up as depression. And I'm not talking about classical clinical depression. I'm just talking about like women who are in some form of a funk, have given up, are settling for their own level of mediocrity, even though their life looks pretty good on the outside to other people, but like for their own internal thriving, they're just existing. And it's also usually the defeatist is numbing out in some sort of way, whether it's sex, alcohol, drugs, shopping, workaholism, because somewhat intrinsically they have felt that they were defeated with their big dream and like it's never going to happen for them.
So I think a lot of people can connect to feeling like their dreams are so far away that there's no point in even going for it. How do you get yourself out of this slump? You know, I always call it the kapha slump of just like, there's so many things I want to do, but I know I'm never going to be able to do it. So why waste the energy?
Ooh. All right, let me dig in to tap into this one, because I have so conditioned myself to not believe that. So hold on.
I'm trying to remember what that was like.
I know. And believe me,
that's a good sign when you're like, I can't even remember that framework anymore.
It's look, I didn't come out of the box this way. I've been we do your work, and then it's like kind of hard to remember what it was like to live in the false belief. Okay. So for the women who think that their dream is too far away. Well, first of all, it's not your dream. And I'm just going to use the word God, if that's okay, because that's what I subscribe to. And then you insert your source, universe, spirit, etc. So if I believe that God put a desire in my heart, then it is meant to come through to fruition when I am spiritually connected. Obviously, when I'm in my own humanness or my own ego, my own fear, I forget. But when I'm spiritually connected, it's like, well, of course it's going to come to fruition. My job is to be on the adventure and to hold the faith of knowing that it will be manifest. So part of the power of the queen and the feminine is seeing things not as they are, but as they could be. So just because you can't see the sun on a cloudy day doesn't mean the sun's not there, and it doesn't mean the sun isn't coming back, and it doesn't mean you're never going to see the sun again. And so that's how I have pretty much programmed myself around my own dreams. So first of all, as a queen, I'll get really grounded. Like, is it really a dream of mine? Like, is it really that important to me, or is it a want or a wish, or it would be nice? Because a queen discerns, and a queen discerns big time between a must and a want. So if it is a must, so I don't pay attention to anything that's not the must of the now. And the queen, like, because she's got a really great relationship with time, she knows what this day is about, or this week, or quarter, or even year, and she's not fantasizing and future tripping. So if it is meant to be manifest, it came from source, and your job is to be open to let it flow through you. And it didn't come from you in the first place, and it's not going to happen because of you either. You're not going to be the one to make it happen anyways. And so when you're so spiritually aligned and dialed in, and you just really get that your job is to be in this open vessel to let spirit guide you and flow through you, and send the earth angels who this is going to become, your dream is going to become manifested because of other people. Like, that's just how spirit uses people. It's like, think about anything that, however you've up-leveled your life or improved your life, it was because whatever, like some client signed up and paid you and that up-leveled your financial situation, or your soulmate walked into your life and that fulfilled your, joy and passion in relationships. So really getting clear that these desires, they're real and they're meant for you. And when you come from the framework that you revere the feminine, and the feminine is the vortex of desires. Like, this isn't just a thought that you thunk up. Like, that's the masculine when you're only operating from the neck up. But a desire is the vortex of the feminine. And your job is just to keep honing it and keep calling it in and keep honing it, regardless of what it looks like. So, for example, I'm actually in the process of working a miracle right now as we speak. Mm. And there is something that is going to happen next week in my life that at this moment, there is zero evidence of that manifestation. And anybody, if I told you what the specifics were, which I'm not going to because they don't matter, and I want every listener here to have a really clean framework for your own, because that's you get to work your own miracles. So every person, if I told you what was going on, you would say it's not going to happen. There's like no possible way this can happen by next week. Number one. Number two, the people in my life who do know what's happening have all told me that's not going to happen. That's like, you could maybe in the future, but it's not going to happen by next week. It's not going to happen by next week. So it takes so much fierceness and so much faith and so much ability to see things not as they are, but as they could be, to call in your miracle and to allow zero concept of defeat to even be in your thoughts, in your consciousness, and certainly not in your vocabulary. And so all I am doing every day, all day right now, I'm seeing, I'm visioning, I'm praying, I'm meditating, and I am asking for what action steps must I be taking for this to take place. So the world would tell us women that we are crazy to be doing this, but what we know is how to bend time and space. When the defeatist has taken over, the defeatist has robbed you of your femininity, of your spiritual connection, and of those powers that we have. We can bend time and space. We can create miracles. And that is exactly what you are meant to do in your life on a regular basis. The Course in Miracles says miracles occur naturally as expressions of love. And when they are not occurring, something has gone drastically wrong. And yet society would teach us that, like if you experience a miracle like once every blue moon, like that's okay. But no, it's supposed to be on a regular basis.
I love that. And I agree with everything you just said. And it's so amazing that all these different spiritual traditions, from Course in Miracles to the Vedas, are really all saying the exact same thing. Because I would say the same thing from a Vedic perspective of living your Dharma is the most selfless thing that you can do, because you are actually a conduit for the wisdom, the message, the product, whatever it is that is seeking to come through you. So really, if you think it's selfish to follow your dreams, it's actually selfless. And at the same time, you need to take action. I think a lot of people, they will stop at the prayer. They'll stop at the vision boarding. They'll stop right there. And it's like, pray and ask, what action steps can I take? And you're out here and I kind of have a psychic feeling what you're manifesting right now, but you're taking action towards it. And I think that that's where a lot of people, I don't see many people who are bringing the spirituality and bringing the action in, and that is truly the way forward.
Absolutely. And you know what? It becomes so fun, actually. The temptation to spin and worry and have anxiety and fear that, your dream is going to take so long or it's not going to happen. If you, me, we, all of us were put that much intensity on how could it happen? How is this possible? How can this take place? Looking into that and asking those really deep questions and coming from this non-negotiable place of nothing less than extraordinary, nothing less than your dreams is good enough for you. And that is the only thing that you're obsessed with, focused on, and committed to calling in. And then you see it happen, which then builds faith, because you're like, you build faith by faith by faith, like success begets success begets success. You're like, whoa, that just happened. And you're like, let's do that again. And then again and again. And then it does just become much more of a way of life. You're like, okay, I'm experiencing, I see the growth opportunity coming up. Like, just like you're like, oh, I see like the sky's starting to get gray. Like, you understand the rhythms as a queen, and you don't freak out over them, but you work with them and you get beyond them.
I love that. And I think what a lot of people who maybe haven't fully stepped away from their defeatist are thinking, well, who are you to want this? How do you get, or they're saying it to themselves, how do you get over a case of the who am I or who are you?
Well, if I have your permission to push, so to speak, God doesn't create extra humans. And the fact that you have a life right now, I think that most of us tend to take for granted if we're not conscious around it. So if God doesn't create extra humans, that means your life is radically necessary and important for what's occurring on the planet right now. And also, I have a belief that God doesn't create junk of any sort. So if God only creates extraordinary, exquisite, victorious, like phenomenal, well, then that means that you're extraordinary, exquisite, victorious, and phenomenal, and a very needed human on this planet. So this whole, like, who am I? I lovingly say it's a bit 1984. It's just an old consciousness. It's like, and I think that, any of the mothers listening, like, if you're like, watch your child say, well, like, I'm not good enough, or who am I? And you're like, what? I birthed you. You are the best thing on this earth, literally. It's like, can you imagine what God says to us? And feels the same way. So it's really time that it becomes so much more mainstream, and it's up to women to lead the way. You push your shoulders back, you lift your chin, you remember who you are, and you are a spirit being with so much potential and such necessary wisdom to come through you. Your light must be shining in a blaze so that your destiny can be accomplished.
I 100% agree. And I love your reaffirming words. And yes, so with you, sister. And I think a lot of people are afraid of other people telling them, oh, who do they think they are? And we essentially play into that other person's limiting beliefs because they don't believe they are worthy of standing up for whatever it is that their soul desires. When they look at someone else doing it, it's very easy to say, who does Gina think she is? She thinks she's a queen. She's no queen. Ha ha ha. Instead of being like, wow, she's fully stepped into this. She's created this as a reality for herself. And that also means I can create my own reality too.
It is something too, like one of the other things that I've outgrown, when I was broke, I didn't know anybody who wasn't, literally. Like maybe like I had like a rich aunt and uncle on the other side of the country or something, quote unquote rich, had like, they weren't broke. I'll say it that way. But, and then I remember when I was like just a hot mess in terms of relationship and just, like everyone I knew who even was in relationship was like gnarly. And I'm like, why am I trying to get a relationship? Like, I don't know anybody in a decent relationship. And I'm like, searching for this. But the flip side is also true, because I don't have anyone, like I'm really like digging, like I don't have anyone in my life right now that would be like, who do you think you are? Like, no, if anything, everyone in my life is like, of course you're going to, of course, queen, it's so supportive and loving. So I think that when we really get that we are the mirror and we are the magnet, and anything that needs transformed, like you cannot go to the next level when you're working through your own learning curve and edge and have people blowing out, your like fragile little flame there. You can't afford emotionally or energetically and probably financially to hang out with anybody who would possibly say that to you.
I 100% agree. And for those people listening out there that they have someone in their head that they're like, oh, she's always telling me, who do I think I am? That is someone you get to reconsider your relationship with. That person does not get to have your energy. That person does not get access to you. And that might even be a family member. But if they're going to come about with this negativity, it's holding you back from your soul mission on this planet. And there's nothing more important than that. So sorry.
Truth.
Not sorry.
Exactly.
So I want to talk about a couple more archetypes just briefly to give people, you do really dive into them in your book. So what is the martyr like?
Oh, so the martyr this is another one that I was like, oh, the martyr's the person that it was someone other than me. And so I'm like, this is the person who thinks they have to do everything, that if it's going to be done right, it has to be done by them. They're damned if they do, they're damned if they don't. And they're like these really negative people, right? Well, one of the things that I've learned is if something is even 5% true, you got to own it. And so though I can do enough self-analysis on myself to know I'm not like the martyr is not my biggest story, but to the degree that the 5% of the martyr that I found in myself, I was like, oh, like as I would catch myself saying like, why do I have to do everything? Why do I have to think for everyone? Like, it's like, oh, there's so much on my plate. And so that whole icky energy is just who the martyr is. And when the queen shows up to counteract that, you're in opposition, your queen follows a no excuses policy. The queen delegates. The queen finds solutions. The queen lives in this place of like zero overwhelm. Like I have nobody in my life gets to do overwhelm. I don't do overwhelm. My clients don't get to do overwhelm. Like everyone knows. It's like we know overwhelm.
I love that. This is actually my shadow archetype, the martyr.
Really?
This is my one, because this year, and we were chatting briefly, we were at dinner last week, and I'm someone who has always done it myself. I'm very resourceful, so I'm very good at figuring out how to do things myself. And I started blogging when I was 19. So I would build the website and do the SEO and figure out how to do digital marketing. And then it turned into how do I build a course and make a sales funnel and do the email copy and like all of the things. And I was, until last year doing every single role in my business. And even now, I'm still the person who's like doing a lot of the things that probably could and should be outsourced. But I think it's my own, that martyr archetype of me that's like, well, I can do it myself faster and I don't want to hire someone to do it. So I'll just go do it now, but it's actually holding me back. So I can definitely relate to the person that feels this like, almost like a superwoman of like, I need to hold down the fort because if I don't do it, it's all going to collapse.
Right. Like it's a badge of honor.
Yeah. So any tips for stepping out of that?
Yes. So martyrs are cheap with themselves. And as queens, it's really important for us to get what it is to make money, spend money, invest money, and do it from a very adult place. And so really getting, so I have this great friend, and she's a mother, and there was like a minute when I was considering motherhood, and I was like a little nervous about it. I was like, I don't know if it's really for me. And she said, you are required to be the child's mother, not the child's maid. And that's the way I feel about women in business. Like to so many degrees, our business is our baby. And you are required to be your business's mother, but not the maid. And not that any of us are above the maid. I don't mean to say that any of us are above anything, but you cannot be the queen if you are going to be the technician. You cannot be the queen and the maid and the technician and the guardsman and the secretary and all of it. You cannot live your soul's mission at the highest level because you only have a certain amount of time, but you only have a certain amount of attention. And to the degree that we are doing the tasks that are taking up our attention from the higher calling and the higher mission, we get it justified in, oh, I don't want to spend the money on that, or I can do it faster, or nobody's as good, or whatever it is. And the truth is, Spirit knows where people are. Like, there's going to be like such a blessing in someone's life to get to be your assistant, just to be around you and soak up your vibration and your consciousness and learn all these amazing new concepts while they're doing the things that it's time for you to graduate from.
Totally. Yes. And I think that a lot of us, we only do that when it's like, it's not never too
Painful.
late, but it's like, it's like you literally can't bear it anymore. And you're like, oh crap, I gotta have to hire someone. But the queen looks ahead. She's like, what could I potentially need in the future so I can continue to remain in the state of non-overwhelmed, not get to the point that my plate is so full that I have no choice but to hire someone. And oftentimes it's just out of desperation.
Right. So for everyone listening there, it's like, oh, well, this isn't me because I have invested in myself. I have hired. Well, the other way that I've caught the martyr showing up in my life. So first and foremost, like not hiring, because you tell yourself you don't have the money for it or you can do it better, whatever. Then how about hiring the duck and not the swan? Right? Like, so you're like, you got this team member and it's like, you're getting frustrated. You have to explain everything. You got to, like almost half do it, but you're like, I don't, really, you kind of get what you pay for sometimes. So you're like, I don't want to hire a higher level person. This is fine. I'll just manage this person more, like all of that natter. And so really challenging yourself to be queenhood, that it's not just about hiring, but it's hiring the A player for whatever the position is, and because everything is a frequency and it's got to be a vibrational match. So lack is not a vibrational match, but neither is mediocrity. And so I think it's necessary for all of us in our queenhood to not fall prey to codependency or martyrdom or any of the lower level archetypes in our queenhood. You get to say, this isn't working for me, and call in that higher vibration, because the higher vibration you surround yourself with, from team member to clients to friends to all of it, you're just going to go up, up, up as well.
I love that. So deeply resonates with me. Of definitely when I started to hire like a couple of years ago, I would go on like Upwork and look up literally who's the cheapest person for this job,
right?
And just hire them. And I'm like, they don't speak any English, but it's fine. We'll be able to communicate. And it would be so frustrating because I'd be like up at night talking to India on Skype, and but I had a block in my head of, well, people who live in the US are going to be too expensive and I can't afford it. And I'll just get it done myself and it's not that big of a deal. So I'm so glad I found my shadow archetype. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for revealing that. It's all, I think, this is the other thing too, that when you drop Little Miss Perfect, you start to realize how much more interesting you become and other people become when you like get into the real stuff. So thanks for sharing that, Sahara.
Of course. So you have so many other incredible archetypes in your book: the naive princess, the gladiator, the avoidant princess, the ghost, the bitch, the paranoid gangster, the roller coaster rider, the money slave, the gambler, the abuser, the frugal fanatic, the secret spender. Literally, guys, the list goes on. This book is so helpful for helping any woman just like connect to their feminine and all these different sides of their feminine. And, once you really figure these archetypes out of like, where am I falling into? What are my habits, et cetera? It just helps you get to know yourself on a deeper level and then find the right, coaching or journaling prompts or whatever it is you need to know specifically for you. So thank you so much for writing this book. What inspired you to write this book, by the way?
I had a dream of sharing the content that I share with my super high-end clients in my high-end programs with the masses, because I've been, doing this format for almost 20 years now. And the basis of my work is based on the ancient story of Queen Esther of Persia. And for those that don't know it, it's Christians know it from the Bible, Jews know it from Purim, and everyone else knows it sort of as a Cinderella story, or once you learn about it, it is. So I definitely realized that this story is every woman's story. So real quickly, the story of Esther is she was a Jewish orphan girl, and her parents die in the war. She gets exiled out of Israel, sent to Persia, where she lives like a second-class citizen. And then the king gets rid of his queen. So they round up all the young maidens of the land to pick a new queen. And she gets thrown into the palace harem with all these other beauty contenders and has to hide her identity, hide who she is. And then unbeknownst to the king, he picks the Jewish orphan girl to be the next queen of Persia. Right after she becomes queen, there's this law issued in the land to kill, destroy, and annihilate all the Jews. So then she's got to go and expose and risk who she is and go before the king and say, I am a Jew and I'm asking you to save me and my people. And spoiler alert, he does. And in my book, she becomes the heroine of all time. So the reason why I wrote this book is that I realized that we are all ordinary women that are destined for greatness, and that only from the position of queen can we fulfill our calling. Esther could never have saved all of her people if she was not in that power position and if she was not there to speak that message. And so that's what I firmly believe for all of us. There's a famous scripture that says, Esther, for such a time as this, you have been called into royalty to save your people. So if you've got anything squeamish going on inside of you of like, well, I don't like, who am I and this and that? And I say, stop. For such a time as this, you too have been called. And it's up to all of us women to look within ourselves and just own our own for such a time as this moment. So that is the basis of all of my work. That is a chapter in the book. So that's where it started. And then honestly, Sahara, the spirit just led. Like, this is not the book I thought I was going to write, because it was very different than my proposal. I had this idea that I was going to have this sophisticated, elegant voice in it. And it was going to be all things like ancient and Queen Esther. And when I started writing, it came out, I don't know if mothers feel like this. Did you have the kid that you didn't plan on having? You love this one. You love it even more than what your idea was. But that's how I felt about this book. It's a little, I don't know, sometimes it's funny and sometimes it's snarky, a little irreverent. And I didn't plan on it being as memoir-y as it is, and sharing as much of my story as I do. So the whole thing was really, if you enjoy it, you can thank Spirit for it. I'll say it that way.
I love it. And I think a lot of us, we're so afraid of sharing our stories because we don't want to bore someone with the details of our lives, and who cares? They don't even know me. But it's really the stories of other people that inspire us to create change into our own lives. And I think that's why archetypes are so beautiful. Because we could talk about, why it's important to, not be codependent, but we could put a name on that and a personality on that. We're like, I see how that plays up in my life. And you can look at it. And that's why I love goddesses and these archetypes and Myers-Briggs and Enneagram and doshas and astrology and human design, because it just allows you to see all of the patterns. And if you do one thing one way, you probably do something else another way. So it just puts together all of those different pieces of the puzzle and gives you a good look at your blind spots.
It's so true. And it's just so beautiful to see. Glad you're not obsessed with your path, Sahara. You're just go on and on and on. It's so beautiful to see a woman like you, so in her dharma, so in her passion, and just can't get enough.
Thank you. And just like you, I'm obsessed with this book. I keep reading it. I keep getting more and more wisdom out of it. You're never going to get bored because there's so many good archetypes. And I bet you're going to be able to see someone that you know in each and every one of them. So where can people pick up your book, The Audacity to be a Queen?
Yes, come on over to divineliving.com/book. You can go to Divine, Divine, Divine. I don't think I have to spell it for this crowd, but most crowds I do. It's divineliving.com/book. And you will get all the details there and pick your favorite bookseller to purchase it from.
Well, thank you so much for stepping up into your full Dharma, sharing your wisdom with us, helping us better understand ourselves and have the audacity to be a queen.
Absolutely. As always, Sahara, it's such a joy just to be around you and soak up your sparkly energy that's just so full of depth and wisdom as well. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Yes, Queen. I hope you enjoyed that episode. You're going to check out Gina's new book, The Audacity to Be a Queen. How are you feeling with the queen in your life? Have you fully stepped into her? Are you playing with the martyr? Are you playing with the saboteur? What do your shadow archetypes look like? Let me know. Send me an Instagram message or comment over at I am Sahara Rose. And I'm so excited to connect with you further as we embody our queens, our goddesses, our highest selves, our priestesses, our warrioresses, whatever it feels like for you. Show up in your highest light and your highest self because the world needs you. If you loved this episode, I would love if you could leave me a review in the iTunes store. And as a free gift, I will share with you the first half of my unreleased book, Eat Right for Your Mind Body Type. Simply email a screenshot of your review over to Sahara@eatfeelfresh.com. Again, Sahara, Sahara, at eatfeelfresh.com, and I will send you over the first half of my unreleased book, Eat Right for Your Mind Body Type. Thank you and namaste.